I'm going to show you how to take some raw community data, combine it with some other data, and use it to generate some incredible insights that you can action and make some real progress and some real positive outcomes in your organization. I've got a list of unique file numbers, ID numbers for those people right here, and I've got some information telling me about the nature of the engagement with their community. I've got people that are visiting my community, people that are making comments, and people that are actually creating content in my community. Now on another side, we've got some HR data. So how do we combine those two data sets together to start telling us something that's going to really help us create some great actions? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to pull the data over from the community data into our HR data, right? So you need to make it all into one big data source. It's easiest to work with it in that way rather than trying to work with two disparate data sources. And what you're going to need to be able to combine these two pieces of data is that single unifying number. Now you might use an identification number if your organization has them, or you might use an email address if you've got an email address. So in this case, we're going to use our ID number, and we're going to use something that's called a Vlookup. And what a Vlookup does is going to look up that person in another set of data, and then once it finds that person, it's going to go across a number of columns that we choose to tell us the result. So for example, it's going to look for that person 705 in this list, and then it's going to say, when you find that person, go across one column and tell me whether they're a visitor or not in my community. Here are my visitors box here, and I'm going to start typing in my formula. Now any formula in Excel starts with an equal sign, and then you start typing the formula, and in this case we're going to type Vlookup. That's our formula. That stands for vertical lookup, in case you're wondering. And then we're going to start typing in our formula. So the first thing we need in our Vlookup is to say, well, who are we looking up? The second thing is, where are we going to look for this person? So we're going to jump over to our community data. So we're going to select the columns B through E right here. And I've held down the shift button, so I've just clicked the column letter B here, held down shift and done it all the way to the end, B through E. And then the next thing we're going to do is say, how many columns do we want to count to return that data? So we're going to say, starting from the column B, how many columns do we want to count to return the data? So in this case, we're going to count two columns. We're going to count one column, which is column B, and the second column, which is column C, right? Two columns in total. So the lookup is against the first column, and then we're counting across to the right, inclusive of the first column. And then the last thing is whether we want an approximate match or an exact match. Now in my experience, I don't think I've ever come across a situation where I'd use approximate match. Exact match is generally the way to go, so that you know either that person has been found or they haven't. So we're going to type in false, which means we're going to go for an exact match, and then close the brackets right here. So in this case, I can see that 708-513 is indeed a visitor of my community. Now to fill this data down, you can just double click the little square at the bottom of the cell here, that little green square. Just double click that, and that's going to fill that formula all the way down for you. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this again in my next column, because now we're going to find out whether he has actually commented in my community. And in this time, we're going to count 3 columns. Fill that down and do the same for the next one, and then fill it down. So now look what we've got. We've actually completed all our data now, and not only can we tell all of this great demographic data from our HR data, we can now also tell whether these people have been engaging in our community as well. So now we have our data, we need to analyze that data, and we're going to use a pivot table for that. And what a pivot table does is allows you to look at your data and filter it out in different ways without touching the data, without worrying about deleting it or moving it around, to create some insights. We're going to go ahead and hit insert at the top here, and then click pivot table. And the first thing it's going to ask us is, where do we want to be looking for our pivot table? And we can go ahead and click the up arrow right here and select the range of data throughout which we want to look. And again, I'm holding down the shift button to select the first column, holding down shift, and then going to the final column in our data set. And here is our pivot table. So let's say I've got the question, can you tell me about who is visiting my community? So here's my visitors field right here, and if I drag that down into rows, I get the options for visitors. 0 being they haven't visited, 1 being they have. But I can drag multiple fields down here, so I can say, can you tell me who is visiting my community by business area? So I can drag the business area bit down here, and you can see now I can see exactly which business areas are visiting my community. And then what I can do is I can take that and say, well, tell me exactly how many people from each business area are visiting by dragging that business area field down into the values section. That's the numbers that are coming out. And now I'm starting to get some really interesting numbers, because now I can see 1,132 people from audit are visiting my community, but 1,145 people from audit aren't visiting my community as well. So now I can start comparing those business areas and ask questions like, do I have a deficit here in certain business areas? Am I seeing greater adoption in some business areas than I am in other business areas? So I can start analyzing people by their age range, and I can say, do we have a specific age range that is not engaging in my community? Or perhaps you could compare that. Instead of using visitors, you could use commenters. So you could say, which age ranges of people are commenting the most on my community? And again, you can find that out right here. So you can start cutting this data in different ways to start analyzing your people and saying, where are our problem areas? Where are the people that we need to get more of? Do we have, for example, a gender imbalance on commenters, right? Are we seeing more males than females commenting in our community, or vice versa? And then when you combine it with a chart, if you actually put a chart in and link that chart to your pivot table, you can start analyzing exactly what that looks and see it in a visual way. And as you make changes to your pivot table, this chart's actually going to update for you live. So it's so easy to create something that's going to tell you insights into loads of different areas. Hopefully you can start seeing just how powerful it is with this small VLOOKUP function and a pivot table, how you can start combining multiple data sources to create some incredible insights in your community. Hope you've enjoyed this video today. If you have, make sure you leave a comment, make sure you share it, and share your tips on how you create insights into your community. See ya.